Hello, I'm here today to speak to Cameron Addicott, author of the best-selling novel The Interceptor, which has also been made into a BBC series. Hello, Cameron. It's great to catch up with you. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, after I came out of the forces, I joined Customs as a VAT inspector. But pretty much straight away you can work out that looking at books and records every day is not that exciting. Eventually, after about 2 years, I got picked for sort of undercover duties. So I became a surveillance officer, intelligence gatherer, person who kicked the doors in, arrested people, took them to court. The whole sort of range of duties that an investigator stroke detective would get up to. I did that for nearly 20 years. I spent years on teams that recruited informants, handled informants infiltrating into drug gangs. I worked as an undercover officer working against commercial smugglers and heroin dealers, driving a truck. I spent 3 years in London tapping the phones of organised criminals all over the world, liaising with the Americans, GCHQ, all sorts of different foreign agencies in an effort to stop organised crime. In 2006, the government, after a 20-year sort of lobbying promotion by the police, set up the Serious Organised Crime Agency, which was a mixture of detectives from the National Crime Squad, so police officers with drugs experience, and investigators like myself with drugs experience from Customs. And they set up a catch-all agency, SOCA, to deal with the whole audit trail of organised crime. So if you were looking at, let's say, cocaine, in the past, Customs would deal with the people who brought the drugs into the country, and the police would target people who moved drugs around the country. Well, clearly, that is going to be a duplication of effort in some parts, because the gangs that bring them in, they're going to do both things. So the government set up SOCA in a way to look at dealing with the whole audit trail. So SOCA looked at not only the producers of cocaine, for instance, but the people who brought it in, the people who sold it to the UK nationals on the street, and the people who moved it around the UK and dealt it on the corners. Mm-hmm. The problem with that was that Customs officers like myself very quickly became aware that we were second-class citizens. The police were very much more influential at a higher level. It was clear that they were getting all the really exciting top jobs. Customs officers seemed to be edged out of a lot of equations. So after 2 years in SOCA, I decided that I was going to resign. Mm-hmm. So I resigned. I travelled the world. I spent 2 years travelling, backpacking around South America, Central Europe, Asia, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, the Far East, and ended up in New Zealand. Whilst I was doing that, I wrote a book. Okay. So before I started travelling, I was, in fact, it was halfway around. I'd spent about a year, 8 months in South America. And I came back to the UK, and I travelled around Central Europe, and I got to the point where I'd sold all my assets, house, car, the whole lot. All my savings were gone, and I was moving to New Zealand after doing the second half of my trip. I'm stood in Waterstone's bookshop in Gloucester, just flicking through the crime novels and what have you, and I noticed a book by a guy called Harry Keeble, who was a drugs detective in Hackney Drug Squad. Mm-hmm. And he'd written a book about his experiences, 1 year in the life of a detective. And I was reading the back of it thinking, I've got loads more stories. He's talked about this for a year, but I've done this for 20 odd years, and I'm sure I've got more exciting stories. On the back of the book, it said if you need to get hold of the author, or if you want to get hold of the author, you have to go through his agent, Andrew Lowney. So I thought, well, I'll just send off a 2-line email. Now, this is about a week before I was due to travel to India to start the second leg of my trip. So I'd got rid of everything, house, car, the whole lot. I was staying with my parents, and I was just ready to fly on something like the Monday or the Tuesday, and this was kind of Wednesday or Thursday. I sent him an email saying, it was a 2-liner saying, you don't know who I am, but I think I might have an interesting story. I've just read Harry Keeble's book, and this is a very brief outline of what I've been up to. Sent in the email, didn't think any more about it. It didn't even have a computer. I was using my mum's computer. I didn't check my emails again until Sunday night. And he'd replied within 10 minutes saying, come to London next Monday. I've got a contract for you. We can do a book. So I think, okay, well, I haven't got any. I've got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get on National Express. It's 4 hours to London. I went to London and met him. He took me out for a very nice lunch. And we signed a contract that afternoon. And he said, I need 100,000 words off you. That's 1,000 words a day for the next 3 months. I said, well, I'm about to in 2 days' time, I'm going to India. I'm going backpacking with like a really tight budget. He said, well, you'll have to go and get a laptop. I had to go and buy a laptop, the smallest one I could find that I could do word processing on. It got stuck in my rucksack. I went to India. I was on such a budget that the hotel rooms I was in, they were hotel rooms that didn't have desks and nice comfortable chairs that you can sit down and write 1,000 words. So with either on the bus or the train or on the edge of the bed with my laptop on my knee, I produced more than 1,000 words a day. Every time I got anywhere near a bit of internet connection in the middle of India or Nepal, I would send him what I'd done over the last 3 or 4 days or the last week. And so it went. I basically wrote everything I could remember about my career from the minute I walked into the undercover office in Avonmouth. And eventually he said, well, I think we ought to be concentrating on the 3 years you spent tapping phones in London, because that is by far the most, from a reader's point of view, that's the most interesting thing. So that's what we did. 90%, 95% of the book is true. We've changed the names of the guilty and some of the innocent and all of the officers to protect them. We've changed some locations and what have you, but basically the book is true. Okay. And, well, it went straight to #1 on the Amazon True Crime bestsellers list, which sounds great. It lasted at #1 for a week. Mm-hmm. It's not really ever been seen since. I think it sold about 10,000 copies in 4 years. But the thing that came out of that was that the BBC picked it up. The BBC have a department called...
How exciting is that? How excited were you when you got the email, I take it, or telephone call?
Well, it was amazing. The book had just been published, and somebody clearly had sent a copy of the book to a girl in the BBC. And she worked for Book Acquisitions, which is, they look at hundreds and hundreds of books, and they decide whether there's any point in buying the rights with a view to turning them into some sort of show. And somebody had sent her this book, my book, and she'd read it and thought, wow, this is a good idea. Got hold of one of her friends who was an executive producer at the BBC, and they rang up and said, come to London and we'll talk about it. God, I can't, you know.
Hello, this is the BBC.
It was, no, hello, this is the BBC. So I turn up and they say, no, we really like the idea. We love the story. We think there's a series in it. And we'd like to sort of take this forward. Now, this is the end of 2010. And I used to tell people, the BBC want to turn it into a TV show. What that actually means is that one executive producer amongst 500 want to turn it into a TV show. She has to persuade the bean counters, the accountants, the script, the head of BBC Drama, the head of BBC One. I mean, it must have taken 2.5 years. I think it was February the 1st, 2013. I was at work. I hadn't heard from her for about 3 months, and my wife was saying, this has all gone dead. we were working on scripts and ideas and batting them backwards and forwards, and we're thinking, it's just not going anywhere. We haven't heard anything at all. And she rang up and said, I haven't spoken to you in the past few months because I didn't want to jinx anything, but they've greenlit it today. They've the head of BBC One, Danny Cohen, has said we're going to make it. We're going to commission the series. Off we go. So I kind of dropped the phone. Then we started working on the scripts. I didn't write the scripts. They got a whole team of script writers in. And I was a kind of technical consultant and script consultant. So they would send me a draft, draft 32 of the first episode, and I'd go through it and say, yes, that's a great idea or a good storyline, or that's technically that would never happen. There's a lot of things that change for dramatic purposes, but I had some input. We did that, produced 8 scripts, and filming started something like July 2014, 6 months of filming, 3 or 4 months of post-production, and then it came out in June, July.
So I have to ask, because I've always wondered, as an author, when you see it come out as this series with the characters that they've chosen, how do you feel about that? Because obviously you have the vision. It's bad enough being a reader and then...
Well, I think there's a lot of authors who say, oh no, they've ruined my book. Well, if you don't want them to change it, then don't sign on the dotted line. The book was, it wasn't based on the book. It was the book was an inspiration. The ideas and the way that we worked in the book, that was what was the inspiration for this team. So we made up, all the characters in the book were real people, but the characters and the plot lines in the show was all completely dramatized. So I didn't ever feel, oh no, they've ruined the book, because I knew that it was one step removed from what I had written. And I think if they had followed the book, if they based it on the book and followed it page by page, you still can't complain, because for dramatic purposes, they have to change so much, because, in reality, if you're on surveillance, you're sat there for 11 and a half hours waiting for the guy to leave home to go and do something tasty. He leaves home and goes straight down the pub, and then you stand down and go back to your hotel. So you've got half an hour of nothing at all. So they cannot replicate that in a drama series. But I thought it was a great series, good scripts, really good actors. And it's won some awards, so we're happy with that.
So at the point that you thought that you had a story or several inside you, at what point did you feel that it was worth writing the book?
Well, I think it was the fact that, a lot of people like myself have got great stories. But I didn't think about writing the book until Andrew Lowney, the agent, said, I also think you've got a great story, and why don't you write it? So that is, you kind of need some validation. You need somebody to say, somebody that you probably respect. I mean, I didn't know Andrew, but you look online and he's probably the best independent literary agent in the country. He's fantastically successful. He's got a great list of authors. And if you ring him up I emailed him and he comes back in 10 minutes and say, you've got a great story, come to London, that's kind of quite a big incentive and motivation to do something about it, which we did.
Okay. So what would you say to anybody else that was thinking about writing their story?
You have to get into and this is something I only learned afterwards, so this is something I've learned from writing it, is that it doesn't matter what you write, you have to write every day. It doesn't matter whether it's rubbish or whether forget about whether the grammar or the language is right or wrong. You have to get in the process of forcing yourself to sit down and write every day. Like me, a lot of people have got jobs. It's very difficult after a 12-hour shift to come home and say, I've got to sit down for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is and write. But you must get into the practice of writing. You must also read all the time, because you pick up clues. You know, it's not plagiarism, but you pick up little phrases or the way that somebody describes something, or dialogue. You pick up clues from your favourite writers. Mm-hmm. So you have to read and write. If you don't read and write, it doesn't matter what story you've got, it'll never get out there. You have to force yourself to sit in front of that laptop and start typing. And it doesn't matter whether you, after an hour, you've written a couple of thousand words or whatever it is, and you read through it and think, that is awful. It just sounds awful. It doesn't matter. It's the process of writing. And like every other thing every other human endeavour, you have to practice. You are not going to sit down and on day one write the first chapter of a brilliant book. It's taken me, I've written one book. That's nearly 5 years ago. I've been working on the second one and the third one for 2 to 3 years, and I've been doing it an hour here and an hour there, but you have to, and it takes forever. Because you go back over things and you rewrite it and you edit it yourself, and it's a long process. There are some writers, I guess, who can sit down and write a book in 30 days or 4 months or whatever it is. They may be successful, they may not, but you have to get into that process. You have to think of yourself as a writer. Mm-hmm. You can't think of yourself as, I've got a great story, what a bummer it is that nobody's telling it. If it's your story, you've got to tell it, and you've got to sit down and physically tap those keys.
Well, thank you very much, Cameron, for speaking to us. I hope all the budding authors out there are getting ready with their laptops as we speak. Hopefully they'll be in India and Nepal when they start. We wish you every success with book 2 and book 3, and we're looking forward to reading it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.